Well, hello there. According to my little window here I'm looking to, it says that I am now live. So here I am, live on Memorial Day, May 26th. Before I do the show, I have to type all my information into YouTube. And I was like, what is the date today? It's really bad. When you work from home, sometimes you do lose track of things like that. And that's never a good thing. I just knew today was Memorial Day. In fact, today I may keep things a little shorter because I do have some plans for this evening. But I always try to keep this date with all of you. Hi, Kathy. Thank you for joining. I try to be consistent with the show and always be here for all of you who are so loyal for me. And I love just free forming, getting on here and just seeing what your comments are, your questions, see what topics it takes us to. Kathy, are you having a good Memorial Day? I hope you are. Um, because I live a semi-retired life now. I don't work my full-time job. I used to work, in the health field, worked very hard at that. Now I work from home ever since the pandemic, and I do my freelance artwork. I do writing projects. I do YouTube. I work with my wonderful friend and mentor, Dr. Whimsy Anderson, as her assistant, and even do her show with her on Tuesdays, Oracle Whimsy Taco Tuesdays. And I do this little thing here. Let's see, Ward. Hey, hi, Ward. How are you? It's okay to be a tad late. I hope you're having a good Memorial Day. So I was saying, Ward, I might keep it a little shorter today because I do have some plans for later, but I just tried to show up for you guys as you show up for me. And I'm always intrigued if you have topics or suggestions or questions. It's fun to see where this goes in this freeform state. It's been an interesting day for me because I try to always keep up with my real life job working for Dr. Whimsy, making phone calls to her clients. That it's one of these things we do just as a courtesy, to let her know she's there for everyone and see if there's anything on anyone's minds, questions, comments, anything constructive they would like to say. And I get to talk to people all over the country, New York, Florida, Texas, South Dakota, and put my finger on the pulse of what's going on with people and what concerns are. And I think a lot of people right now are just, without going into all the politics and the news, what's going on. A lot of people are very upset right now. They're scared. They're feeling unstable. And I always enjoy talking with people sometimes people just need someone to listen to them, or maybe I have a little input I can give, or things people will say to me. I learned something. So I always enjoy that. I love people very much. And what was this word? You visited your papa's resting place in the cemetery. He was a World War II Pacific vet. Now that's exciting. I bet your father had some stories and photos. My father, he served in World War II, but he never left America. There were times where he thought he was going to go overseas, but it didn't happen. But my grandfather, see, I was a late life baby. That's why I have a mother and father got married in 1942, and they were very much involved with World War II. And also, my mother was a late life baby, so her father fought in the Spanish-American War. My grandfather, so it's quite fascinating to go through the old photo albums and to just recount some of the stories. Let's see. Ward, how's Miss Sasha doing? Oh, Miss Sasha is somewhere here sleeping. She dug a new hole in my carpet. I discovered that over the weekend. I was like, eek! Pets, they bring us joy. It's said that pets will lower our blood pressure, but they can certainly raise our blood pressure too. But we love them anyway. And Joyce, hi, Joyce. Oh, by the way, Joyce, our mutual friend Anastasia may be giving you a call. I'm not going to talk about it publicly here, but she could use some wisdom and guidance from you. Um, Yeah, it's intriguing. It's like everybody is in a shall we say, a flux right now? And I say everybody, I say that word loosely, but I've been hearing this just talking to people. But what I also hear is that people are finding their inner strength, they're finding their inner truth. It's like everybody is being called to take a stance. This is not a time to be complacent. So, um, that's one of the reasons I like talking to people. I find I learn just as much in listening. Or yeah, my grandfather was in the Spanish American War. You had a double great grandfather in the U.S. Civil War, not on this side. I don't know if my family had any connection with the Civil War. I know on the Dransfield side, my father's side, the first Dransfield in our family came over from England in the late 1850s, and he settled in what is now West Virginia. I say West Virginia because I think at the time it was still Virginia. I'd have to get my history straight here, and I'm a history buff, but yet I believe it was at the time of the Civil War. The division caused West Virginia to break off from Virginia, my state. Um, and I do have some interesting photographs from that period. And I've digitized a lot of those. I need to. I think it'd be a very lovely thing for me to print those out for my family, and maybe with my sister, because she knows a lot of the family history. Also, the two of us could kind of put some of the story together. It needs to be recorded and preserved. But yeah, it's so nice to have you guys all join. I hope Joyce, Kathy, Ward, you're having a good Memorial Day. I know for myself, it's frankly just another day of the week, but I will be doing something with some friends in a little bit later tonight. What was this? At the first Transfield progenitor was now in West Virginia. He likely would have been from the Union. I realize that, but I don't think my family was actually involved in the war as far as anybody actually being in the military or anything like that. No, that I realize it would definitely have been Union. In fact, in the southern part of West Virginia, where my grandmother's farm was, there is a town called Union, West Virginia. And I'm sure that's where it comes from. Um, even Joyce, your mother's brothers were all in World War II. Yeah, it was quite exciting. My parents were so young when they got married. I think that they let's see, they met on a blind date in October of 1941, and they were already engaged by Valentine's Day of 1942. And of course, the war had just broken out, and I think there were a lot of people during the war who rushed into quick marriages for that reason. Then there was also the fear that the groom might not be coming back, and that sometimes was the case. But I know my parents got married very young. They got married on my mother's 22nd birthday, later in 1942, but they purposely put off having children till after the war. They did not feel it was fair to the child to bring a child in if my father didn't come back alive. They didn't tell me that until many years later. In fact, it wasn't it was my father. My parents tended to be very close-lipped about a lot of things, keep a lot of things secret. It was after my mother died, my father finally opened up to me and told me a lot of these stories. Like I always assumed that I was an accident. I did, because I came along so late in their lives. They had this one kid and they wait 14 years to have another. We're the only siblings. And I found out from my father after my mother died that I was deliberate. I was planned because they just frankly knew time was running out for them. If you're going to have that kid, you better have it now. And so I got here. By the skin of my teeth. What was this word? Mama told me of her shock at learning Pearl Harbor, and she was a young girl close to her birthday. Well, I on my 50th birthday, I treated myself to a trip to Honolulu, a 3-day trip. And when I was there, I made a point on my birthday to go visit Pearl Harbor. I don't know if any of you have ever done that. First thing that shocked me was how tiny Pearl Harbor is. I've always seen on the newsreels those big, all the ships sinking, the fires, everything. It looked massive. I get there, it's almost like a pond. It's so little, at least in comparison to the way I'd always envisioned it. But I'd always wanted to see it in the first place, ever since I was in grade school, and I was always a history buff. And I always knew, well, one day somehow I will see this. And I thought, well, here I am. So that's what I did on my birthday. And as I was on the little ferry boat, that took us out to, it's where the USS Arizona is, of course, submerged underwater, and they have the tribute bridge built on top of that. And it's amazing because because it's so small, the water is shallow, and you could see the ship below the water very clearly. It wasn't that far down. I was told it was still to this day leaking oil. Oil was still boop, boop, coming to the top. You could still see that. And of course, it was treated with great reverence because it is a grave site. But when I was on the ferry boat going out there, I thought, this, like we called the Twin Towers ground zero. I thought this was the ground zero for World War II, for at least as far as America goes, American participation. That was the ground zero. It's like this little tiny, tiny harbor. It was like a little pinprick, on a globe, like a little pinprick. But the ramifications, and I thought, because of this, my mother and father, they married very hastily. Because of that, I came around, but I just thought all the children, the baby boomers, the housing boom, everything that happened when all the soldiers came back, so many things originated here in that spot. And so that I was a little awestruck by that. Let's check some other comments here. Oh yes, that's right. World War II did end on the USS Missouri. I think wasn't that was where the treaty was signed. Yeah. Wow, it's something. See, that's what I mean when I do this show. I never know what directions we are going in. But it's always intriguing, and I learned some things about all of you. Miss Joyce, she has traveled the globe. Joyce, you and my sister would probably like each other. My sister has been to every continent on the planet, and I mean every continent. She finished up with Antarctica. So she could cross everything off of her bucket list. Yeah, but I very much want to get back into travel myself. Frankly, I can't afford it right now, but things change, circumstances change. I've had trips come to me when I've least expected them. And I've mentioned on the show, I very much need to get my passport renewed. Yeah, I was bad. I let it expire during the 2020 pandemic lockdown. On my birthday, I had been hoping to go back to Venice. One of the happiest times of my life was in Venice many years ago, and I wanted to go back there. And I ended up spending my birthday sitting here on this couch in my living room, talking to people on the phone. So much for that. But, I did have a really sweet thing happen. A couple of dear friends of mine, Stephanie and Tammy Hunter, they're sisters. They're gifted therapists, brilliant women. In fact, I'm surrounded by brilliant women. I have wonderful ladies in my life. They surprised me. They said, be sure you're home at noon. There was a knock on my door. They knew I'd wanted to go to Italy for my birthday and couldn't. So there was a knock on my door, and it was a delivery from the local Italian restaurant, a great big pizza and a lasagna and spaghetti and tiramisu. It was a whole feast. And I was really touched by that. And that's the sort of thing I will never forget. I will never forget that kind of kindness. What was that word? So your sister didn't leave Antarctica to the penguins? No, I think that was something Donald Trump did. No, Donald Trump wanted to put tariffs on the penguins. That's true. That's true. He wanted to put tariffs on Antarctica. But anyway, I tried to keep this show politics free. Ever since I got, shall we say, a little bit of verbally attacked by some people last fall. Uh, oh, yes, I was filled for, well, no, I wasn't filled for weeks because I was such a gluttonous pig. I think I ate all of that food in about 3 days. Oh, but it was heaven. But but it was also the love in it. Plus, I have a good Italian friend. He tells me that, food is love to the Italians. My God, why am I talking with my hands right now? But they very much associate that with love and nurturement, and I'm okay with that. I remember when I was in Venice many years ago. Oh my God, the food. I remember the food as much as the sights. I remember having calzone for breakfast and calamari for lunch. And, I want to go back. I want to go back. I want to travel. I'm really getting the itch to go back to Europe. And I don't know how it's going to happen, somehow, some way, but I'm putting the intention out to the universe. Um, and I think I want to spend an extended period in Italy this time. If I do it, I got to figure out the logistics of it. I'm lucky. I have a friend in Barcelona and I have a good friend in London. In fact, I have two friends in London now that I think of it. So those are some people to visit, spend some time with. As far as Barcelona goes, that's one of my favorite places. I've been there twice, and I did it the second time I was there 10 years to the day, to the exact precise day. It just happened to work out that way. I told the story about how I flew there for a good friend's wedding, and it was one of the most impetuous things I've ever done in my life, where I flew to Europe for a 3-day weekend and turned around and came back. Now that's decadence. But I had, here in LA, when I was in the health industry, I would have a lot of wealthy clientele, celebrities, people who could afford to do things like that, the jet set crowd. And I'd have people go, "Oh, I flew to Paris for the weekend. I flew to Paris for breakfast and I came back." And I always wondered what that would be like. And it was a circumstance where I couldn't get the time off from work, but I very much wanted to be there for my friends. So I did it. I flew to Europe for a weekend and came back. But it coincided with Barcelona because my friend was in Sitges, which is about a 35-minute train ride. It's a beautiful little community right on the Mediterranean coast. When I was there, I had people actually say to me, "Oh, you're from America. Please don't tell Americans about us. We don't want Americans coming here and spoiling our beautiful little community." And they didn't mean that as an insult. It just meant, any of you, if you've traveled abroad, you've seen American tourists, how they stand out, and they frankly can be a little obnoxious. And I think that's what they meant by that. Like, we had this special little community and we want to keep it secret. We don't want to be flooded with a lot of tourists. That's what they were trying to say. They weren't trying to be insulting about it. But because I was 35 minutes from Barcelona, I made a point of going back there. And it was just wonderful. That's one of my favorite places on earth. Let's see, where's some other comments here. Oh my God, yeah, I would imagine anybody seen concentration camps. My parents never saw the true horrors of World War II. I mean, they dealt with the stateside inconveniences. By that I mean the rationing, shortages, the fact the first 4 years of their marriage, they only saw each other like every 2 weeks or so. It's just say that, which I guess they didn't really begin their marriage. So he came back from the war. But I have my mother's old love letters, and probably I shouldn't have been reading them, but there's nothing in them. It's really bad. But my father saved all of my mother's letters. And I know he even, when my sister and I asked him about them, he said, no, no, that's private. And um, he said, I can't do that to your mother. I can't betray her privacy. He was very loyal to her. But it was after my father died, my sister said, let's look at the letters. And I did. And there's nothing in there that's bad. But anyway, she used to write about the things like my mother was working in a war plant at the time, as many women were, and she had to work the night shift. And one thing in there that was a little funny, see, my mother was a lifelong television viewer. She loved her soap operas. Our television was on in our house from in the morning when the Today Show was on, through the soap operas in the afternoon, straight through to primetime TV, right up to Johnny Carson. It's amazing our TVs did not burn out faster than they did. So my mother would write in the letters, I'm missing all my radio shows. This darn war, I wish it would end. I hate missing my radio shows. And I had to laugh. That was just so much like my mother, only the 1940s version, and it was radio instead of TV. Yeah, I was just looking at some of the comments here. I don't have my glasses or my contact lenses on right now, but I can read. See, but yeah, it's kind of a fun romanticized time now, because I have all these great old black and white photos of my mother and father from that time. My dad in his army uniform, and my mother. She always prided herself on looking like the young Shelley Winters, but I think my mother looked like Ava Gardner. She was a beauty. And my father even said that. My father acknowledged, he said, oh, I married out of my league. He was, she was quite the prize. A lot of guys wanted her. She had a lot of boyfriends. She told me she had one boyfriend who had, one of those open cockpit planes, kind of like, how to describe it, like the Red Baron or something, one of those World War I flames. He had one of those planes, and he used to take her up on flights, and she's complaining, oh, it used to mess up my hair, And my mother had, because she was a only child, she was very spoiled by her parents. She had a pony. I have pictures of her in jodhpurs, the horse riding togs, and she always had the latest fashions, beautiful 1940s fashions. That was such an era for women's clothes. I think it was probably one of the most beautiful periods ever for fashion for women, the 1940s, very glamorous. And my mother, I'm sure some of my love for old Hollywood probably is genetic, because my mother was a big movie goer, and she loved Clark Gable. She loved Clark Gable, and I forget who else she loved, like Betty Davis and Betty Grable. She loved Betty Grable. And so I think my mother always loved to emulate those movie stars. And my mother was always very over the top, some would call her a drama queen, which she was. She was very over the top, very big. I always thought there was a part of her that would have liked to have come out to Hollywood and tried her luck in the movies. And it's interesting how children can carry out the prophecies, the dreams of the parents. Now, I never was successful, but I did come out to Hollywood, and I did pursue things for a while. And my sister, well, we both traveled a lot, but my sister traveled the world. And it was always interesting, because once my mother confided, I asked her if you could have been anything you ever wanted. And she said, well, I would have liked to have been a writer and traveled. And I thought, my sister and I have done a lot of that. It's like maybe it was in our genes. She instilled it and passed it down to us. What was this word? One would never have guessed that about my late mother. I can't remember what I was saying so much about her, but I think I get the gist of what you mean. Kathy, what were her favorite soap operas? Well, I know she loved Another World. Oh, these are all soaps are gone now, but she loved Another World and Young and the Restless and Days of Our Lives. Remember McDonald Carey? These are the days of our lives with the hourglass. And I resisted so hard not getting stuck on those things the way she was, but she got me hooked on Search for Tomorrow. And it all started because Search for Tomorrow used to come on at 12:30, lunchtime. So summers when I'd be home from school, she'd be fixing lunch. And of course, we had a television in the kitchen. We had televisions everywhere. We had 5 TVs in our house. I tell you, it was a television worshiping household. So on the TV during lunch break was Search for Tomorrow. And I remember, the actress Morgan Fairchild, she was on Search for Tomorrow at the time. And it was this plot, she was the beautiful vixen on the show, the flowing blonde hair and everything. And they had this thing where she crashed through a plate glass window and cut herself up and everything. I'm there with my sandwich, dropping my sandwich, like, oh my God, she just went through the window. And I wanted to see what was going to happen the next day. And then the day after that, and the day after that. And of course, they worked in this silly thing in the plot where she had her hair going over part of her face so you wouldn't see her scar, until one time she said, "You want to see what happened to me? This is what happened to me." And she pulls her hair back and they put all this latex makeup on her and stuff. But anyway, I got hooked. I got hooked on Search for Tomorrow. I didn't plan on doing that. I thought those things were stupid. And yet here I was having to watch my soap opera. And I was in high school at the time, but every time there would be a high school break or something, I would watch it and I would tell my mother fill me in because I had to be in school, darn it. I couldn't watch my soap opera. So my mother would have to fill me in on what was going on Search for Tomorrow. And this is how bad it really got. After I was in college, I started planning my classes around Search for Tomorrow. And this was before there were VCRs. I'm old. This was before that existed. And I still remember I was with my guidance counselor. And, as you would do at the end of the semester, and you're planning your classes for the next semester. And there was this class I really needed to take. It was like a big requirement. And the only option they had was for 12:30s during the day, 12:30. I was like, oh, I can't take that. I can't take that. We've got to find another class at another time. We got to. And the guidance counselor's like, but why? Why? This fits in with your schedule. This is perfect. This is why. And I couldn't tell him the truth. It conflicts with my soap opera. That's when Search for Tomorrow was on. But anyway, yes, I took the class. I wasn't that stupid. I wasn't that far gone, but it was like, oh, I gotta miss my soap opera. And then during the summer between my sophomore and my junior year, I worked a summer job. It was at a Burger King. And then after summer was over, I kept working weekends so I could save up money to buy a VCR. They were just new on the scene. They were very expensive. I mean, expensive. The one I ended up buying was like $900. It was a Betamax. But I was the one kid in my college dorm with a VCR. Oh, I got very popular. Oh, Chuck, would you record this show for me? Would you record this for me? And anyway, I didn't have to plan classes around Search for Tomorrow anymore. I could finally time shift, but it was funny. And I still remember when Luke and Laura got married on General Hospital, and I recorded that, and we had a viewing party that night in my dorm room. Memories. Dates me. A lot of people are like, "Oh, what's the big deal about this?" But any of us who are old enough remember what a big deal that was, how magical a VCR was. That you could actually record a show and it looked just like the real broadcast and everything. But um, anyway, my mother got me hooked on Search for Tomorrow. I think those were the big ones she used to watch. And my mother used to call them her stories. Her stories. And I remember there was one, I think it was Another World was the one. There was a character named Liz Matthews, played by the wonderful actress Audra Lindley, who later played Mrs. Roper on Three's Company, if you know who she is. Anyway, Liz Matthews was like this villain. Ooh, she was a conniving, bitchy villain. And my mother used to curse Liz Matthews. And my mother would get on the phone. She had this gossip line going with all of her other friends who watched these soaps. Well, can you believe what that Liz Matthews did today? That was my mother. What was that word? Ever think that? Oh, yeah, that Luke and Laura bond did not start out healthy. If I remember correctly, it started out Luke raped Laura. Yeah, I wasn't watching it at the time. I don't know. I'd have to look that up myself, but it was like a really bizarre plot twist where they had the characters fall in love and get married, but it starts out that way. In fact, I don't even know today that would be accepted. It would be so politically incorrect to do that on a show, on a soap. But then there's so few soaps left anyway. Um, or you thought Another World was going to be a sci-fi show. You know what you're reminding me of is Dark Shadows. Oh, all the kids, because that came on like 3:30 in the afternoon. All the kids were on the school bus rushing to get home to watch Dark Shadows. Now that was a very original soap. And I was reading that's one of the very few soap operas where all the episodes still exist, because most of those shows in those days were done live, or if they were videotaped, the videotapes would be erased and recorded over. So most of those soaps don't exist anymore. But Dark Shadows, the producer kept all the videotapes because his plan was to syndicate the show abroad, particularly in Europe. And it was very far-sighted on his part to do that. And that's why to this day, we still have Dark Shadows. I haven't watched it in ages, but I think you can find it on Amazon Prime. I know there have been DVD releases of that, which I don't know how they did that, because must have been thousands of episodes. I don't know how they did it, but it does exist. You can still watch it. And I think they still have Dark Shadows conventions, fan conventions. Let's see what else here. Oh, Joyce, the Friday night soaps, Falcon Crest and Dynasty. Oh, Dynasty was fun. I was just the other day on Facebook, I posted a portrait I did of Joan Collins. And no, I didn't know her, but I can say I was lightly acquainted with Joan Collins, because she used to come into my business, and I met her many times. And people, actors get so associated with their roles and the personas of their characters. So whenever I tell people, I used to talk to Joan Collins, people go, "Oh, wasn't she a bitch? Oh, rich bitch, horrible. Oh," and I said, no, you're wrong. Joan Collins was one of the sweetest people I've ever dealt with in my life. Warm, very sweet. And let me tell you this, very down to earth, very unpretentious, easy to talk to. Again, she was just a good actress. She played a character. She played the character of a conniving, rich bitch, and everybody just assumed that's who Joan Collins was. No, Joan Collins has a wonderful sense of humor about herself. I always looked forward to when she would come in. And it was also interesting one time I got to see her, because she didn't do any star trips with me. She'd come in with her husband, and her daughter was so sweet. And we would just talk about life and things in general. But there was one time, because she was a celebrity, I saw her walk out in the parking lot, and the dreaded paparazzi appeared, the cameraman, in her face, literally in her face, snapping pictures and following around and everything. And I watched Joan. She was such a pro. She just adjusted herself, her posture, so she'd look her best. And, she always dressed beautifully, always looked nice, but she just gracefully walked out to her car like she was on a film set as the photographers there taking her pictures. She was used to it. It was a fact of life. She knew these pictures were going to be in magazines, so she better well look good. And I remember talking to one of those paparazzi cameramen once. We had so many of them where I worked in West Hollywood. And there was one time we had a cafe across the street, and Jennifer Aniston was over there, and it was innocent. She had her little dog with her, and she was feeding spaghetti noodles to her dog. It was just real cute. Well, in the parking lot where I worked must have been about 20 cameramen, snap, 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 taking pictures of her. And I asked one of the cameramen, I said, really? Jennifer Aniston feeding pasta to her dog? And that's what you want to photograph? And he said, yeah, I can get about $7,000 for these pictures on the world market. And he explained to me there are the tabloids in England, the tabloids in Australia, all throughout Europe. It's a big worldwide market. So even innocent little pictures like that are worth thousands of dollars. And then if you get something really scandalous or enticing, it can be much more than that. This was years and years ago. It was, Ricky Martin. He's since he has come out. He's very open about his homosexuality, and he's been married to a man and children and all. But at the time, it was a closely guarded secret, for career reasons. And the cameraman was saying to me, because I asked him, what would be the most valuable picture for you to get right now? And they said, we could get millions of dollars if we could ever get a picture of Ricky Martin with his boyfriend. If we could ever get that, because that was when Ricky Martin was really, really hot in his career. But I just think, what a way to make a living. Ugh. The cameraman even handed me a card and said, look, you get any celebrities in your store or anything, you see anything, you call me and I'll give you $100 tip. I didn't do it. I just couldn't do that to someone, because, I had a lot of celebrities in my store. And I've said this before, 99.8% of them were wonderful people, kind, decent people. And I was not going to hurt people like that. I wasn't going to do it. And I had chances. There was, in fact, I'm going to be classy now and not say the actress's name, but let's just say she was very big A-list actress. And I caught her in the back of my store behind the shelves. She was making out with her boyfriend. By making out, I mean kissing, nothing illicit, but she was kissing. I mean, if I had been unscrupulous, I easily could have taken a little picture with my phone. I could have done it. I could have sold it. I could have made thousands of dollars. No, I won't do that. I have to live with myself. But those paparazzi photographers, they can be pretty cold-blooded. I guess I don't know what happens to their soul. They get so caught up and they don't care about the ethics. And, another thing, when I'd get a lot of celebrities at my store, we had big windows. I mentioned that about how I could see Joan Collins with the paparazzi. I got to look out at the parking lot and I'd see the cars that celebrities drove. Now, most people would assume they'd be in BMWs and Mercedes and Cadillacs. No, more often than not, I would see celebrities in very modest little cars like Toyotas and Volkswagens and things like that. And I was told that's intentional because they know that paparazzi follow them. So they want to throw them off guard. So they purposely drive very modest little cars. So they'll just blend in. They don't stand out. And it's actually a smart thing to do. And I think they're also thinking of their safety and security. But that was a big surprise to me. see a big star driving a modest little car. And I saw it over and over again. Occasionally you'd see someone, with a nice car, but not that often. Like I heard stories like Bette Midler once in an interview years ago. She said, "Oh, I drive a Ford Fiesta." And the interviewer was like, "A Ford Fiesta?" And she said, "Yeah, I don't care about cars. All I care about is something that gets me from A to B." And I remember once seeing a picture, paparazzi picture, Carol Burnett. And, you know, dear sweet lady, she was doing a very decent thing. She had tapped somebody's bumper or something. And so she was writing a little note to put on their windshield to contact her so she could take care of it. But in the picture, they revealed she was driving a Volkswagen Bug, one of those modern versions of it. But nonetheless, Carol Burnett was driving in just a little Volkswagen, so it just bears out what I've seen. It's like most of the celebrities I'd have come into my business, all these myths about entourages and all that. I think I only saw that 3 times. Randy Travis had a small entourage with him. Remember that? Little Richard. Oh, now he was big and over the top, but he embraced it. He's who he was, and I think he knew his fans expected that of him. So he would always pull up in a big stretch limo, and he had an entourage of people. And the other time I saw an entourage, I guess it's okay to talk about this, Donatella Versace. Oh my God, what a trip that was when she came in. She had a big, long, black stretch limo, took up a big part of our parking lot, and she had an entourage. If I remember correctly, 10 very handsome young men, all in their 20s, all wearing black silk shirts and black pants. Whole entourage. There's Sasha behind me. And she brought her entourage with her in the store. And I'm not sure what purpose they served, but hey, people were asking about Miss Sasha, and here she is. She's squirming. I don't know how long she's going to cooperate. And, but anyway, I love this little girl. She, I told you she just had a 10th birthday a few weeks ago. And she's still thriving and kicking, and she's actually cooperating. She's not squirming, so I'll hold her as long as she'll let me hold her in front of the camera. But anyway, those were the 3 times. You want down? I better put you down. 3 times I saw entourages. Otherwise, celebrities would just come in like real people, casual clothes, not necessarily dressed up or anything, and just wanting to be treated like a regular person. I mean, occasionally you would see some little quirks and eccentricities. Mickey Rourke. And I loved Mickey Rourke, by the way. He was a sweet man, but came in, t-shirt, old jeans, came time to pay for things. He reaches in his back pocket. He's got a big roll of $100 bills with a rubber band around it. That was his wallet. He's just like $100 bills, But otherwise, most celebrities, just nice, regular folk. Joan Collins, getting back to what I was talking about originally, just the sweetest, most down-to-earth lady. In fact, I always smile when I see Joan Collins. I like her. I have a feeling that if I ever were like standing behind the ropes on a red carpet or something and she were walking by, she'd call out to me and say hello. That's the kind of person she is. What was this word? Miss Collins' character, Alexis, never said goodbye, but just hung up. Yeah, it's too bad the smartphone generation will never know the power of click, hanging up the phone. Sometimes Dynasty is fun. I rarely watch the show anymore, but occasionally I'll watch clips like on YouTube or on social media. And like Joan Collins' birthday, there were lots of clips of coming up of her and Crystal having their cat fights, where they throw each other into a pond or something, a lily pond or something. I think there was one where Crystal hit Alexis, "You bitch," and they both slid down a hill and mud, and they went into a big mud hole and stuff like that. But I have a feeling those actresses had a lot of fun doing those scenes. you know, um, Having had a chance to know Joan, I think she got a kick out of that. And I'm sure she had fun, and all of her jewels in her hair and her Nolan Miller couture slamming down the phone. There's a wonderful clip I saw of her and Diane Carroll. Remember when Diane Carroll joined Dynasty? And I remember how they build it up. Diane Carroll, she said this herself. She said, I'm going to be the first black bitch on Dynasty. That's what she said. And of course, she was kind of like the counterpart to Alexis, where she was beautifully coiffed, and she was always dripping in jewels and Nolan Miller couture. And she and Joan Collins would have it out. There was one where Joan is serving her champagne and she sips it and she goes, "This is burnt. You left it in the freezer too long." And Joan Collins is like, "Well, I'm so sorry. Perhaps some caviar." And Diane Carroll's character looks at it and says, "Oh, I only eat Bulgarian caviar. Not that, not that swill you're serving." I'm paraphrasing it, but it was really funny. And I got to meet Diane Carroll once in my driveway. I met Diane Carroll in my driveway, and I was living in West Hollywood. I was good friends with Frances Davis, who was the former wife of Miles Davis, and she lived one floor above me in my apartment building. Frances was a delight. Loved that lady. She was quite a fixture in West Hollywood. Everybody loved her, but we were always getting celebrity visitors at my apartment building. Diane Cannon used to come over, Suzanne Plachette, Dionne Warwick. I mean, these were all friends of Frances, so they would all come over to my building. And there was this one time, a beautiful black Mercedes pulled up into my driveway, my building. I mean, spotless. I mean, just polished and gleaming. And Frances was coming down, and she goes, "Oh, Chuck, come here. I want you to meet my friend Diane Carroll. Come over here, meet her." And the electric window came down, and there was Diane Carroll. So beautiful. I mean, just impeccably coiffed, and her makeup was impeccable, and her clothes were impeccable. And I even remember her perfume was impeccable. And she was gracious, and she held out her hand, not to be kissed, but to shake her hand like that. She held her hand out. That she was such a lady, such a lady. And I adored her. I just loved meeting her. But I just thought, this is so surrealistic. Diane Carroll in my driveway. And I resisted saying, "Wow, as a little boy, I used to watch you play Julia." Remember her show Julia the Nurse and all, but Diane Carroll, I later learned as a kid, she was a wonderful singer. I used to see her on variety shows, and I even have one or two of her albums. Gorgeous, gorgeous voice. But I'll just never forget what a gracious lady she was. What was this word? I wonder if Frances Davis had any point of view as far as Cicely Tyson. Not that she ever said to me. Not that she ever said to me. That's an interesting point. I should have asked her about that. I think maybe it's because I wanted to be respectful, not ask personal questions unless she volunteered the information. But Frances had incredible stories. She told me that she was the first African American ballet dancer in the Paris Ballet. And she was also in the chorus of the original Broadway production of West Side Story. She played one of the Puerto Rican girls. And I mean, that in itself, I was blown away because I love West Side Story. It's one of my favorite cast albums ever. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I know somebody who was in the original Broadway production. And she said, yeah, she was in it for quite a few months. And she was supposed to come out to Hollywood to do the movie version. And Miles Davis would not let her. She told me Miles was, she had horror stories about Miles Davis. He was very abusive, and he was very controlling, very much the male chauvinist, very much about, you do what I say. My wife does what I say. And he said, you are not going to Hollywood to make that movie. So she missed out on an incredible opportunity. And I know she had regret about that. And she even said to me a few times, I got out of that marriage in the nick of time before I lost my life. I mean, she may have been exaggerating a little, but yeah, he was an abusive man. But I remember one time, she held court. She had so many celebrities come to our building. One day, Don Cheadle came over to visit, and it turns out I talked to her afterwards, and she was telling me how Don Cheadle wanted to make a movie playing Miles Davis. And get this, and Frances was really excited. She said, and Halle Berry is interested in playing me. Oh my gosh, she was so excited about that. I don't think it ever came to fruition, but I remember Frances talking about it, and she was hoping it was going to happen. And frankly, another reason Frances was hoping that was going to happen, the money. It wasn't like I lived in a slum tenement or anything like that, but let's just say it was a middle-class apartment building. It was not a luxury building. Frances was not wealthy. She had enough. She got by, but she still worked. She was a hostess at a restaurant called Hamburger Hamlet on the Sunset Strip, which I don't know if any of you know, but it was very famous, and she was quite beloved there. But she worked for a living, and she lived in a middle-class apartment and so forth. But she said, I had a great life. And she still had all these celebrities who still took her, like, to Aspen and Hawaii and trips and things. So she got a lot of perks out of it. Let me check my comments here. But yeah, Ward, she never discussed Cicely Tyson with me. I do know that she told me about how she was on 3 of the album covers for Miles Davis's records. And when I looked those up, I saw how, well, she was always beautiful, but she was really stunning when she was young. What was this? I remember there was a brief sitcom that had Miss Carroll as the mother of Whoopi Goldberg. I don't have any knowledge or recollection of that. I wonder I know Whoopi Goldberg did a sitcom with the wonderful Gene Stapleton. I think it was based on the movie Baghdad Cafe. I maybe watched a little bit of one episode, and I know it got canceled very quickly. And I mean, my God, Whoopi Goldberg and Gene Stapleton, what a pedigree! But there's scores of shows like that, big stars, where their shows didn't work out. Judy Garland had a variety show that didn't last but one season. And I think, my God, you had a chance to have Judy Garland come into your living room every week. Bette Midler had a sitcom. It flopped really badly. Jimmy Stewart had a show that flopped. Claudette Colbert had a show that flopped. Sometimes stardom does not transfer over to the television tube. In this case, you had Gene Stapleton, who was one of the biggest television stars ever. Edith Bunker, and Whoopi Goldberg. I think it was shortly before she got her Oscar for Ghost. Didn't work. Let's see. Let me see. So I guess it's probable that Mrs. Davis felt sorry instead of respectful of Miss Tyson. I don't know. I mean, Frances was not a woman to hold a grudge. She would, I never heard her speak disparagingly of people, maybe of Miles, but nobody else. She was a very gracious woman, very friendly. She loved people. I couldn't, my guess is she probably had more sympathy for more empathy for Cicely Tyson, like, I know what you got yourself into. I hope you survived it. It might have been that kind of thinking. Here's Sasha again. She can't make up her mind if she wants to be on camera or not. So we'll just see what she's going to do now. Come on, Sasha. It's your close up. Don't turn away. Come on, let people see your pretty blue eyes. Okay. Yeah. Oh, no, Joyce, how is your kitty doing? Yes. Okay. You want down? You want down? Okay. We'll put you down until she decides she wants back up again. But let me get back on the track here. Yeah. What was that? Forgive me, but Miss Carol as Miss Goldberg's mother, not even if her character had taken a wrong turn into prison. Forgive me. I know. Well, yeah, I know. I wasn't even aware Diane Carroll, was ever worked with Whoopi Goldberg. That was just the one thing that came to mind when you said sitcom. That's the only sitcom I can think of that Whoopi Goldberg ever did, and that was when Whoopi was going through a little bit of a career lull before she had a renaissance with Ghost and that Oscar, because I know she did The Color Purple. She had a lot of flops. May have been Whoopi just taking whatever was available for her. Oh, Joyce, I'm glad Maya's doing well. We love our kitties, don't we? But when you were saying that about how did Francis feel about Cicely Tyson, I'm immediately reminded of my friend Evelyn Keyes, because her last husband was Artie Shaw. And of course, Artie Shaw had 8 wives. And among those were Lana Turner and Ava Gardner. And I remember, I've told this story before, I just try to be to the point, but Ava Gardner came up in conversation because I used to talk to Evelyn about everything. We were quite close. And I said, I knew that Evelyn, even though she had divorced Artie, they had remained friends. They were still together. And I asked her, if Artie had ever read Ava Gardner's autobiography, because in the book, the last page is an open letter to Artie Shaw, where it's Ava thanking Artie, because she felt she had never thanked him properly for enriching her life, because Artie had done a lot to contribute to her education. Artie was a very intellectual man. Evelyn told me the same thing, how he was always saying, you need to read this book. You must read this book. You need to see this documentary. He was very much about improving his mind, but also his wives' minds. And so he mentored Ava Gardner quite a bit, and she wrote the most gracious open letter in the back of her autobiography. And I told Evelyn, and Evelyn just, there was no bitterness like, well, that bitch, that other woman who was married to my ex-husband or something. No, she was like, oh my goodness, how sweet. That's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. And it's like Evelyn felt a sisterhood, with women who had to deal with Artie, because Artie was a very difficult man. He had a very explosive temper. He was very volatile. He was very eccentric. And ultimately, that's why each wife ended up divorcing him one by one. But Evelyn just spoke so warmly of Ava Gardner. And of course, I've told the story on here of she checked with Artie, and no, he had not read the book. So I took my copy of the book, gave it to Evelyn. Evelyn took it to Artie Shaw. And I'm very proud of the fact that in a roundabout way, delivered Ava Gardner's final message to Artie Shaw. A little bit of trivia there, since we're talking about former wives here, celebrities. Let's see, there's some other notes here. Let's see. What Miss Carroll once did, having our say with Ruby Dee playing Centurion Sisters. They did a fantastic job. That play was turned into a TV movie. I didn't know that. I know that they were both wonderful actresses. Diane Carroll had quite a bit of range. Yeah, and I also had a friend who used to work at Sierra Towers, which is a high-rise apartment building. Remember, I was saying how I had kind of like a more of a middle-class apartment building. This is an apartment building where the elite live, millionaires, billionaires, celebrities. I understand Cher at one time owned 2 floors. She just bought out 2 floors and had staircases built to connect them together and turned it into a mansion in the sky. But Diane Carroll used to live there, and interestingly enough, Joan Collins used to live there too. And my friend used to tell me stories, and she had nice things to say about Joan, not so nice about Diane, but I will leave it at that. My personal experience was nice with Diane, and I'm going to leave it at that also. Let's see, any other comments here? Because I might be wrapping this up a little early because I've got some Memorial Day plans. Have you guys, have you done anything for Memorial Day or anything for this evening or anything? I know you're on different time zones. Here it's only 6 o'clock. It's about dinner time here. There's Sasha. Well, where are you? Come here. You want to be back on camera again? She can't make up her mind. You know, Siamese, of course, are descended from royalty. Okay, she wants down. You know, I've told this. The cat breeder that I bought Sasha from, she was also an anthropologist, and she's, you know, it's a known fact that Siamese cats used to guard. Okay, she's telling me she doesn't want me on camera. I better leave her alone. But Siamese cats used to be the only way you could have a Siamese cat was if you had a connection to the King of Siam. The King of Siam would give them as gifts of royalty. Also, Siamese cats, yes, Sasha, Siamese cats were used to guard the palace. So the woman I got Sasha from said it's in their genealogy, it's in their heritage. They know that they're royalty. They're cats of royalty. Sasha knows it, don't you? You know you're royalty. Oh, I love this little girl. So anyway, I may sign out soon unless anybody has a closing comment or question or anything they'd like to say. Anybody? I guess not. So I guess I'm going to wrap this up soon. I'll be doing. Sasha's still here. She's still out of camera range. I'm going to be doing Dr. Whimsy Anderson's show tomorrow on the Oracle of Whimsy channel. Little sideshow going on here. What was that word? I bet the Siamese cats were great burglar alarms for the Siamese kings. Well, I certainly know my cat's a good burglar alarm. There's some times I can't sleep at night. You know how cats can be, like 2 or 3 in the morning. They're nocturnal creatures. That's when their hunting instincts kick in, and so she'll be running all over the place, and I can't sleep because of her. So she's a burglar alarm. But anyways, Sam is going to be doing the Oracle of Whimsy. We do a show called Taco Tuesdays, TWOS Tuesdays. And we've been doing that for 1.5 years now. And that's, of course, the show where we talk a lot more current events and what's going on in the news, and people have more serious topics. And it's a show that keeps me on my toes. I have to do my homework to do that. Yes, Joyce, Sasha is photobombing tonight. You know, Joyce, when you start doing your show again, I'm sure you know Joyce is a gifted astrologer and numerologist. And Joyce, you've talked about bringing back your own YouTube show. You've got Maya now. We're going to expect Maya to be on camera. Maybe she'll photobomb you a few times. And watch Whimsy, the show I do with Whimsy. Sometimes her cat Mila photobombs us, and sometimes Sasha will join in. And maybe it's because Mila hears my voice. Because when Whimsy used to live here in LA, I used to cat sit Mila for her. You know, she now lives in Portland. I do this from LA, and she does her part from Portland. We have a split screen. Whimsy's trip to the Holy Land was magnificent. You know, Whimsy has dual citizenship, Israeli and American, and her heart is very much there with the Israeli people. Whimsy, many times, you know, she's such a gracious humanitarian. She goes there and she does volunteer work. You know, she's always about helping people in any way she can. And she's so connected. And it was a bit of an adventure, as you can imagine. She did, she does a lot of her video updates for her channel, and she did pieces. There was one where there were air raid, bombs, air raid sirens were going off in the background. And she also had a little trouble getting back to America from Israel. So she had to fly to Dubai, and from Dubai come back to America. And she wasn't there long, but she just loved the city. She very much wants to go back. She said people treated her, as she put it, people treated her like gold when she was there. And the video and picture she sent makes me want to go to Dubai. It looks like the Emerald City out of Wizard of Oz. The architecture is just stunning. And of course, it's a very wealthy city too. Yeah, as I said at the beginning of the show, I'm getting the travel bug. I have definitely got to get my passport renewed. And then I got to just start making some money. And then find a cat sitter. Right, Sasha? She just gave me this look like, what are you talking about? Cat sitter. Be forewarned, Dubai is not a walking city. Yeah, okay. There's a lot of it I don't know about. You heard me earlier talking about Europe. One of my favorite things to do in Europe, I've been looking at my hair. I'm going to watch the replay of this show and go, oh, I should have put some gel or hairspray on. But anyway, one of the things I love to do in Europe is just walk. I take public transportation only when I have to. Otherwise, I love to walk to my destinations, because that's how you take in a city. Just watching the people sitting at the cafes and walking around and looking in the shop windows and sights. I've told this one time, the first time I was in Barcelona, I did so much walking. My feet were bleeding. My feet were just covered in blisters. And I was in my hotel room, and I tried to stand up, and I was, I was like trying to walk like an old man. I couldn't put pressure on my feet. I was like, what am I going to do? I have 2 more days in Barcelona, and I'm not going to spend it sitting in my hotel room watching CNN International. So I hobbled down to the local pharmacy, and I must have bought the equivalents. I don't know what translated to in euros, but I bought the equivalents of about $40 worth of Dr. Scholl's pads, like the moleskin, the blister pads, and all that. And I just wrapped my feet. I put blister pads and gauze tape and foam, everything I could think of on my feet. But I patched myself up enough that I could walk again. And I probably did another 7-8 miles of walking that day. I wasn't going to waste my time. I figured, yeah, I'll be in agony probably when I get home, but so be it. I'm not going to let it end my trip. The one thing it ruined for me, that first trip, I wanted to go swimming in the Mediterranean, but I had heard about all the bacteria in the water and so forth. And I thought, with my feet, with all those open wounds and blisters, I couldn't risk an infection getting in the water. So that was the one thing I had to put off, but I made up for it. I've been in the Mediterranean since, but I definitely killed it for me on that trip. But it was funny because my niece, who's now in her early 40s, won't say which one. It's all three. But my niece was a high school senior at the time, and she was there on a school trip, and we agreed we were going to meet. And she saw me, and I didn't realize how much I was hobbling. I probably needed a cane. That's how bad my feet were. She watched me, and oh my God. And I said, don't worry, I'll be all right. And I was. What was that about being cold? That's funny. No, it wasn't cold when I was there. I was there in the middle of summer. It wasn't cold where I was, but I believe you. It's like here in LA, people are usually shocked when they go to the beaches here. You watch the beaches in the movies and TV shows and stuff. You come here, you put your toe in that water. It is cold. The Pacific here is very cold because it's my understanding it's the Arctic current that comes down from Alaska and the North Pole. It works its way down here along the West Coast. And that's why our water is so cold here. Um, what was that? The war, you said the Mediterranean. Yeah, I was talking about the Mediterranean. That's what I meant. When I was in the water, it was not cold at all. Um, but let's see, the old Whimsy. Hey, you've heard me talking about you. Yes, I'm glad you had a wonderful time in Israel. I'm just so happy for you. I was talking about, you when you were in Dubai and how they treated you like gold. And oh my God, I'm so happy you're here. So happy. Um, yeah, I was just giving us a wonderful plug for our show tomorrow, the wonderful Oracle of Whimsy Taco Tuesdays. It's something I very much look forward to and love doing, and I love working with Whimsy. What was this year? Joyce, when I visited my daughter in Aviano, we went to a beach north of Venice and got to swim in the Mediterranean. Oh, Venice. Venice. I want to go back there so bad. I will someday. It's going to happen someday. Yes, Whimsy. We have a big show tomorrow. We always have a big show. We can't help but have a big show with all the stuff in the news. Our wonderful president and our government and all the things going on. It keeps me on my toes. I always have to keep up with the news. Let's see. We're great that you got to do that, Miss Joyce. Yeah, looks like it's all going crazy. What week doesn't does it not look crazy? But we just go with the flow. Yeah. Oh, Whimsy. I don't know if you saw the beginning of the show, but I was just talking, as I do every day. I was talking with some of your people, and everybody just loves you and happy you made it back safe. And to the point where I sound like a broken record telling you how much people love you, but they do. You're very special. Putin is in hiding. Oh my God. I heard, I have to watch the news soon, but I think I heard something where Trump was actually chiding Putin. Trump was putting down Putin, and whoa, wonder what that's about. I got to watch the news. But anyway, folks, I was just about to sign out, and I didn't know we had the wonderful Whimsy here. Yeah, please join us tomorrow. Join the show, join the party. We always have fascinating things to talk about and just see where it's all going to go. Oh wait, they tried to shoot his copter down. He was toast. Whoa. Okay, 6:30 news is coming on in a few minutes. I've got to get up to speed here. He will be toast, as he should be. Yeah, and then, and that's been coming up in the readings. Whimsy is a gifted intuitive, and that's part of what we do on the show. Then what Whimsy does on all of her shows, her readings, and you just always have the most incredible insight. And that's one of the things your people tell me. They look forward to your shows just for peace of mind and balance. And hey, Danny, thank you for joining. This is turning into a little bit of a party, as I was just about to leave. I was just about to sign off. Because I do have some plans for this evening. And it is Memorial Day, and I hope you've all had a wonderful Memorial Day. What was that, Whimsy? Any messages from Lucy about what is going on right now? Haven't really checked in. I'd have to meditate on that one a little, see what you'd have to say. But I tell you what, let me see what I can come up with for tomorrow's show. Does that sound good? Let me see if I get any insights. It says, Danny, I spent last week in Airbnb in Georgia. The Airbnbs are amazing. We want more channeling from me. Okay. Yes, ma'am. I will work on that. I will definitely work on it. But it's Airbnbs, there's one in Fairmount, Indiana, James Dean's hometown. And I did all of the artwork for that, including a great big lighted sign. I'm very, very proud of that. And this Airbnb it's a former shoe store that James Dean, when he was a little boy, his mother used to take him there to be fitted for his school shoes. And it is directly across the street from the James Dean Museum, which in itself is incredible. I was there 3 years ago, and there's a very famous picture of James Dean walking down the sidewalk. He's wearing his farm clothes and he's got a cigarette in his mouth. It's iconic. And my artwork is like less than 50, maybe 30 feet from where that picture was taken. I've got paintings of him in the windows and inside, and my big lighted sign. And you mentioned that about staying in an Airbnb. It was interesting because a very dear friend of mine was at a little cafe yesterday, and she met some people. It came up in conversation. Oh, we were just in Fairmount, Indiana. We visited James Dean's grave. And she goes, oh, my best friend. And she got out her iPhone and pulled up my webpage with all my pictures and said, did you see this? I said, yes, we saw that. We saw all that artwork. She said, well, I'm best friends with the person who did that. So it's kind of like, it's cool. It's a small world. Yeah, I had an incredible time in James Dean's hometown. I got to, again, I know I've told these stories before on here. It's nothing new, but I was at the farmhouse where he grew up. You know, James Dean was raised by his aunt and uncle, and his first cousin, his little baby first cousin, was born while he was a teenager, and they were raised together as brothers. And Marcus Winslow is his name, and he still owns the farmhouse. And I got to come there. I got to see James Dean's bedroom and where he grew up. But it was just a real treat to talk with Marcus for a couple of hours. And then there was a lot of things I knew already from biographies and documentaries. But to actually talk with his real life cousin, to hear the stories firsthand, to hear the family stories, to hear about how they were the first people in Fairmount, Indiana to own a television set. And the reason they bought the television was because James Dean was in New York during the early 50s doing live television shows, live television dramas. So they bought the TV so they could see him afterwards. And I said, well, did he phone you afterwards? And they go, oh, no, we couldn't afford the long distance. It was too expensive. No, we didn't talk on the phone after the shows. And Marcus said, well, Jimmy was always in trouble. We were always having to send him money. And we would see on TV how thin he was, and we would worry about him, but he wasn't eating enough and things like that. And Marcus told me when we called him Jimmy. Everybody called him Jimmy. It was never James Dean. He was Jimmy Dean to everybody in that town. And he said, well, when Jimmy's first movie came out, the local movie theater had a screening of East of Eden just for us, just for the family, 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning. You know, the movie was going to premiere that night. They had a 10 a.m. screening just for the family. And Marcus told me, because he loved it. He was his big brother. He wasn't his cousin. He was his big brother. He loved him. He idolized him. And he said he was a little boy. And there, looks up on the big screen, and there is Jimmy. And he was just like, he was like, the whole family was so excited and they had goosebumps. And he said to me, of the 3 movies James Dean made, that was the movie where he played himself. That was the closest to who he was in real life, East of Eden. And that was his favorite. And, but it was just cool to hear all that. And now something else I'll share about Marcus. Jimmy had been dead for 65 years. Marcus still would cry. He got teary-eyed when he talked about him. He still missed him very much. I got that. And anyway, that was a beautiful experience for me. And I got to meet a 90-year-old high school friend of Jimmy Dean's. And so many stories. I could just do a whole show here. I could be here another hour talking about this. I'll have to do it some other time if anybody wants to hear it. Where's some other comments here? Wait, more insight than the bio. Oh, of course he did. Yeah, absolutely. Because invariably a lot of biographies will have embellishments and so forth, or the inaccuracies. So it was just good to hear a trusted source, someone who's there, who intimately knew him. Even little stories, like I'd always wondered about James Dean's, speaking of Siamese cats, he had a little Siamese kitten that Elizabeth Taylor had gifted to him when they finished making Giant. And I always wondered what happened to the little kitten. I was worried about the kitten. And Marcus assured me, oh, don't worry. He said, interestingly enough, Jimmy had given the kitten away to a friend. It's almost like he had a premonition or something. It was like 2 nights before he died. He gave the kitten away. He said, I, he gave the reasoning, I can't take care of a pet. I'm irresponsible. I can't take care of a cat. I can't be responsible for it. I can't give it the attention. Oh, it was some story like that. But he made sure the little kitten had a good home. And to this day, I know this because it's in the James Dean Museum. He hand wrote carefully all of the instructions, feeding instructions, medication, make sure you put a dropper full of vitamins in the cat food. I mean, he really took care to leave instructions, and they've got that in a glass case now in the museum. Let's see, what is anything else here? Or it must have been like watching their cousin Clark Kent be Superman on the big screen. I think it basically was like that. It was a very, very big deal. But I got how close the family was. And Marcus Winslow is such a decent man, really good, solid, warm Midwestern values. So I have to assume that Jimmy Dean, for all of the bravado and the cockiness and the arrogance and the reputation as part of the legend he has, I'm sure he was probably sweet and down to earth like Marcus also, because they were raised the same way. And of course, his grave, he's buried in a little cemetery very close to the farmhouse. It's just down the road. Those old country roads just down the road. And for many times, I used to think, well, what a shame James Dean was never buried out here in Hollywood. And then when I was there, I thought, no, he's buried exactly where he belongs. He's where he came from, near his family, his farm, his farmhouse, and all. That's where he is. And I've got funny stories there. The first time I went to James Dean's grave, it was 10:30 at night, 2 nights before Halloween. And it was pitch black, howling wind. It was cold. The ground was soggy. The only light I had was the friend who was with me, took me there, the headlights in the car. But I wasn't creeped out or anything by it. But I just thought, what a way to visit James Dean's grave, 10:30 at night, in a pitch black cemetery, all alone with just car headlights. And knowing how irreverent James Dean was, I think he would have gotten a big kick out of that. He would have been laughing. He probably was laughing watching me there. James Dean, if he were still alive, let's see, he was born February 1st, 1931. So he'd be 94 now if he were alive. Could still be here. But anyway, I am now going to sign off because Whimsy just reminded me I need to watch the 6:30 news. I've got to start doing a little studying and homework tonight and getting ready for the show tomorrow. And I've got some plans right now, but I just want you to know I appreciate every one of you. It really means a lot. You come here to join me. And I always make a point of trying to get on here faithfully every Monday afternoon out to return that loyalty back to you. I have a lot of fun. I love just free-forming, seeing where the conversation's going to go. I love getting to show off my cat. She's sleeping now, so I'm not going to wake her up. But what was that, Danny? Yeah, he was only 24 when he died. Only 24. But anyway, I will see you next Monday. And please join Whimsy and me tomorrow if you feel so inclined. We would love to have you. Love to have you very much. It's 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, the Oracle Whimsy channel, Taco Tuesdays. And of course, here, Chuck's Captivating Chat. Same time, same place, only on Mondays. So I'm going to sign out for now. And happy Memorial Day and have a beautiful evening. Bye.